Okay, continuing on with our unpacking of Elihu's and Hashem's answer to Iyov. So quick review from yesterday, and then hopefully we'll try to address your questions next week. But so we had Rambam basically saying that the goal of describing all the natural phenomena in Hashem's answer is to underscore the difference between our actions and his. He's not saying, this is the point that I want to clarify from yesterday, he's not saying we can't understand Hashem's actions, okay? Who does say that? So far, okay? And that's the main difference between so far and Elihu, okay? Is that Elihu is saying we can understand Hashem's actions, it's just that they're not the same as our actions. Point number two is the whole difference between Sefer Iyov, or the whole point of Sefer Iyov is to show the difference between God's knowledge, intentions, supervisions, and management and ours. And if you internalize this idea, then you can bear misfortune lightly without getting to wrong ideas about Hashem, and afflictions will only add to your avas Hashem. Okay, so then I said, how can you summarize this in 2 words? Study nature. And we start to unpack that by saying that the more you study nature, the more you're going to have realistic expectations about how things work. And then you won't think that things should or can happen that really can't. And also you realize your place in the universe and you won't feel as victimized. Okay. The third difference, and this is going to be a topic that I think everyone's wanted to talk about for a while. Oh, sorry. Third topic is the more you study Hashem's actions, the more you are worthy for hashgacha pratis. Okay, which will protect you from Ra type 1 and 2. And Ra type 1 is the natural Ra, and Ra type 2 is from other people. Okay, so we're going to do today is a crash course on hashgacha pratis and hashgacha klalos. And I feel like we've talked about this in davening group, but I don't remember. Usually I teach this in my 10th grade Chumash class, and none of you were in my 10th grade Chumash class. So like I don't feel like we've actually like talked about this formally. Okay, so what is the definition of hashgacha klalos? General supervision. Okay, good, right? So, and remember, what's our working definition of supervision, like as an English word? Like, what does the supervisor do?
Like intervene.
Intervening is one thing, and then watching over, right? Watching over to intervene, right? In order to do what? Yeah, to make sure that it works, right? Which could be to make it better, could be to maintain it. Okay, so what does hashgacha klalos refer to? I mean, I'll translate it correctly, but like, yeah, exactly. So it is general supervision, laws of nature, which basically the way I would define it is Hashem set up systems of law during the days of creation. And the purpose of it is to maintain the existence and order of the physical universe. Okay, so for example, of hashgacha, what are examples of hashgacha klalos, like particular examples? Gravity, rain. That's not enough. That was the next one. Yeah. New rain was somewhere on there, right? Yeah. Yeah. Right. So these are like the forces of nature, right? Gravity, electromagnetism. You could talk about natural processes like photosynthesis, weather patterns, human body doing its thing, right? Like all the systems of the human body. So that's all hashgacha klalos. That's to preserve things working smoothly. Okay. Then there's hashgacha pratis, what's pratis literally mean? Yeah, detail, right? What English word comes from the word pratis? That sounds like it. Say again? Particular, right? So it's actually both. Yeah, and I kind of I don't mean to say it comes from the Hebrew. I mean that the Hebrew and the English both come from the Greek or the Latin or whatever it is. You know, like particular. I think that's true at least. In terms of which one, Greek or Latin? I don't know if the linguists know that answer, like, because I think that goes really early, but yeah, like Greek and Latin definitely came later than Hebrew, and Aramaic and Hebrew, I'm not sure what the relationship is between them. Yeah. So hashgacha pratis is particular supervision or personal supervision. People call it divine intervention. Now, here's a question. What's the purpose of hashgacha pratis? Okay, say again. Okay, so that's part of it.
Part of purpose.
Yeah, why does God intervene?
For justice.
Okay, for justice. What's the purpose of his justice then? So here's how I would say it, and there are different ways to say it. And maybe, Emily, what you're saying could be a way of saying this here, is Hashem changing or intervening in the laws of nature to help human beings become truth seekers who live according to his will. Okay, so like that's why I meant that either that's exactly what you're saying, or that's like part of it, of like having, strengthening your conviction in God. So examples of hashgacha pratis would be Hashem gave Abraham wealth, health, and children. Why? Not just because he wanted to like make Abraham like have money, but as a means to an end of like, so Abraham could set up a nation and like pass on his knowledge of Hashem. Or we read about the brachos and klalos, let's say like in this week's parsha, right? That what's the purpose of the brachos and klalos is if you're doing God's will, he will give you all the resources you need and remove all of the things that could interfere so that you can be further involved in Torah and mitzvos. Okay.
This is the Rambam's view of that?
This is according to everybody, I think. We're going to split into two different views after this. Okay. And klalos is the opposite, right? Is that when we sin, God will either actively punish us by intervening, or he'll remove his hashgacha pratis, so that we can do tshuva and then rededicate ourselves to Torah and mitzvos. Tefillah is another example, right? Why does God answer your tefillos? In order to help you to live as a better Jew human being, okay? Which is going to be like becoming truth seekers to live in line with God's will. Okay, so that's the general definitions. Okay, now obviously there's a lot of machlokas in hashgacha, but there are two general views. Okay, and it has to do really with who receives hashgacha pratis and to what extent. Okay, the popular view now is the Baal Shem Tov's view, which is that, I'm sure you heard this in many different forms as a kid. Everything that happens in everyone's life is determined by hashgacha pratis. Everything happens for a reason. There's nothing left to chance. Like no leaf falls without it being like directly like, moved by God, to like fall on that exact thing. Nothing happens by accident. Okay. Then there's the Rishonim, and there are differences within the Rishonim, but it all follows this general model that the degree of hashgacha pratis in your life is proportional to your closeness to Hashem, which means the closer you are to Hashem, the more hashgacha pratis there will be. The further away you are, then the more you're under the laws of nature and the more you're subject to chance. Okay, and I say chance in quotation marks because when we say chance, like why the quotation marks? Like what is chance?
By God, but you're just subject to nature.
Exactly, right? So it's like when you roll the dice, right? We call that chance, or when you flip a coin, but how is it actually not actual chance?
Like probability.
Yeah, it's like laws of probability. It's the, how the force with which you threw the dice, how it hits the table. It's all laws of Hashem. It's just that we call it chance because we can't predict it. Okay. So this brings us to, oh, sorry, not yet. What does it mean to be close to Hashem in this context?
No, this is what we were going to talk about this morning, right? Oh, have a relationship.
Oh, that was having another thing. Yeah. That's good. That's going to be different. Yeah. What do we mean by close to Hashem?
Knowledge.
Okay, so knowledge is one, which is framework of truth, is what you're saying? Yeah? How else do you get close to Hashem? What are the criteria that make you far or close to Hashem?
All the Torah.
Following the Torah. Or let's say following whatever mitzvahs you're obligated, because they know obviously don't have, yeah. And what else does Hashem care about other than your knowledge and your halacha? Midos, okay, right? So those three things, right? So your intellectual means your level as a Tzelem Elokim, to what extent you are seeking a truth seeker. Morality, how good your midos are. And then your observance of halacha is how will you keep halacha, okay? And that's to put these in Ralbagian terms, mitzvos, midos, and deos. And that's why Torah is really good for your level of hashgacha pratis, because it gives you, it shows you what the mitzvos are. It teaches you truth and attaches you to truth, and then it also helps your midos, okay? Now, this leads us to the famous hashgacha pratis chart, which I feel like I've shown you in davening at one point, but if this is the first time you're seeing it, then this will be a good way to remember these ideas. Okay, so on the x-axis, and my apologies to people who are triggered by math, okay, but on this side, you have people who are far away from Hashem in terms of intellectual perfection, midos, and observance of halacha, and then there you have closeness to Hashem, okay? On the y-axis, down here, you have your life is basically just governed by the laws of nature, like an animal or a plant. And up here, it means Hashem is involved in the details of your life in order to help you become a better truth seeker and one who follows his will. And what is, according to the Rishonim, what is the line going to look like? Like that, okay? Which is, the closer you are to Hashem, the higher level of hashgacha pratis you get, okay? So for example, let's take like the Avos were like very close to Hashem. So we say, for example, Hashem is Magen Avraham, which means that he's completely shielded from the bad stuff that could have happened to him by the laws of nature. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, Miriam are all over there. Okay, let's take someone else like Mordechai and Esther. So they were very close to Hashem. They weren't on the level to get open miracles, but they got hidden miracles. Hashem was still involved in their life. Like Elihu could resurrect a kid. That's an open violation of laws of nature. Miriam and Mordechai and Esther, not so much, right? Let's say like the Tanaim, like the tzaddikim like Rabbi Akiva and like Rabbi Meir, they were very close to Hashem. So a great deal of their life was governed by hashgacha pratis. Like let's say like they had their parnasa taken care of, stuff like that, but they were still subject to the laws of nature, in certain areas. And then let's say like nowadays most of us are like on this area, although it's possible obviously to like it's possible to like be on a higher level, but like most of the human race and Jews are like, we could work on our closest to Hashem. Okay, yeah. All right.
Is this for every single person who's on that high level?
What do you mean?
Like Iyov arguably was on that high level.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So this is for every single person on that high level. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so Iyov is not on, which we'll get back to when we get back to like applying this to Iyov. Okay.
But this is only what the Rishonim hold. The Baal Shem Tov holds
that everything in everyone's life is hashgacha pratis, and that there are different forms of like how far you take the Baal Shem Tov to you. Like there are people who will say there is no such thing as nature, and nature is just an illusion, and everything is a miracle. And we're going to talk about that actually a little bit on Friday, probably. Okay. But so there are like more extremist views than others, but like, and what the reason why they say that the Baal Shem Tov, like there's a essay by the Lubavitcher Rebbe where he says basically that like, what's the Baal Shem Tov famous for, by the way? Yeah, Hasidus, right? So there's an essay from the Lubavitcher Rebbe where someone was asking him about, who's obviously a Hasid, people were asking him about hashgacha pratis, and they said like, what's the deal? Like, if you look at the Rishonim, then they all held by a different view than the Baal Shem Tov. So what it seems like the Hasidim hold is that the Baal Shem Tov revealed a new idea of hashgacha pratis, that was not revealed at the time, So yeah, I mean, that's part of their idea that like that Hasidus was like a new level of revelation in Torah. I'm not talking about like Torah Sinai type revelation. I'm talking about like he got like new insight or something like that, Okay.
What about in the close to Hashem spectrum?
Yeah.
What about like in teaching it to others, like as part of a larger system?
Yeah.
Is that another factor?
So I would include that under midos, yeah, as caring about justice, and righteousness.
Like let's say one person is the only person in the world.
Yeah.
Then would they still have hashgacha in order to learn it for themselves? Like it has nothing to do with like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Meaning, would God care about that person? Let's say they themselves are not on like a super high level, but if they were the only ones who are maintaining a connection to truth, then would God have hashgacha on them because of what that would do for the system?
That too, or also someone is on a really high level.
Yeah.
But they're literally the only person in the entire world, and there's no one going to be after them. Like, would they theoretically get hashgacha?
Yeah.
Even though it's not for
they still would get hashgacha even though it's not for other people. And then regarding the other case, arguably that's kind of like what the deal was with Noah. Depending on how righteous you say Noah was, like maybe he wouldn't have deserved it if he were in a different, under different circumstances, but because he was like the last remaining person who was like attached to the correct ideas, then Hashem saved him anyway,
But they get hashgacha in order to further their person.
Yes, right. But in Noah's case, I'm saying that was Hashem was not only concerned about Noah, he was concerned about the continuity of the human species. Like knowing Hashem, yeah. Now there's one, I debatable whether you call this an exception, but there's one like exception to the rule that's proportional, which is tefillah. Okay, how this works as an exception is what do you call it? Is a matter of debate. But tefillah can make a person eligible for hashgacha pratis, even if that's not your like current level of closeness to Hashem. Which is why we say that a person should never refrain from davening for something and by saying like, oh, I'm not on the level to get it, because tefillah is a means of asking Hashem for assistance even when you are not deserving, Now the question is, how does that work? Because on the one hand, we say tefillah raises your level to make you worthy of hashgacha, But on the other hand, we said tefillah is a matnas chinam, like you're asking for something that you don't deserve, So I'm not exactly clear on this, but all I know is that practically speaking, then you should never tell yourself, oh, well, like, I'm not an Avram Avinu, so like, why should I daven for something? Hashem's never going to like intervene to give me that, Not necessarily true. Is that we hold that Karav Hashem l'chol karav l'chol asher yikra'uhu b'emes. Hashem is close to all those who call him, to those who call him in truth, which means that even you who might not be a tzaddik, through tefillah can merit a hashgachic response.
So people who don't believe in this or they think that tefillah operates that.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, meaning like if Hashem is already involved in every single detail in your life.
Right. Or like or you can't question it. Everything is hashgacha and like.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because even according to that view, like I think they would undoubtedly say that things could get better for you. So So I'm not sure what the that view I'm not as familiar with because it's not from the Rishonim. Yeah. Okay.
Hashgacha a reward.
What was it?
According to this, hashgacha a reward.
No. Well, depends on what you mean by reward. I'd say hashgacha is a facilitator. It's a means to an end. Incentive is part of it, but I think facilitator is more accurate. Like an example of if Klal Yisrael is keeping Hashem's Torah and in line with his will, he'll make it rain in its times so that you get enough food, so you don't have to worry about food. And he'll protect you from your enemies, so you don't have to worry about your enemies. And he'll protect you from sickness, so you don't have to be sick. So that because all those things would take you away from Torah. So he's removing the obstacles and giving you all your resources so that you can fully devote yourself to Torah and mitzvahs.
Why wouldn't someone just get that without even having it? Like
without being deserving of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean so you're asking why is it proportional to your to how close you are to Hashem? Yeah. So it's a question I come back to from year to year. I have a current answer, but I don't know if this is the only answer. Let me ask you first. Why? It almost sounds like. Can someone make an argument for why it should be different? Yeah, her question is: Hashem the closer you are to Hashem, then the more He helps you, and the further away you are, the less He helps you.
You do it anyway. If you're not close, if you're so close to Hashem, then whether or not you have food, you'll still spend as much energy as possible.
Well, that is true, but I think clearly if you are like starving to death, then like you won't be able to be involved in Torah and mitzvahs as much as if you had it, and it's beyond your control. So that's where Hashem helps you. So I think you could make the argument of shouldn't Hashem help the people who need it the most, like who are like the furthest away from Him? Like why doesn't He help them?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's why I'm saying it's a reward.
Right. So that's one route you can take. I think I think I don't like that route because I don't think that that's what our idea of reward is. That's like in the physical, But I think there's another primary reason. What happens? So if you are a Rebbe Akiva and Hashem gives you money, what are you going to do with it? Yeah, is you're gonna right? Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Teaching Torah, giving to tzedakah. You're gonna use it to like implement God's will and like continue seeking truth. What happens if someone's far away from God and then God gives him money? Yeah, he's gonna spend it on something that's gonna take him further away from God. Right? Or like so. Let's say that example is it'll corrupt his mitos. Or like if a Russia gets money, he'll use it to actually harm people. Or if you're not a Russia, but if you get money, you're going to attribute it to your own success.
You get money.
That's why some
Yeah,
people
right.
were like,
So
if you believe that like Hashem made it, that some people are wealthy and some people aren't as wealthy in the world.
right, yeah. But clearly, if you are not in the correct mindset and you get money, you're probably not going to relate to it and use it in the right way. So that's why that's my answer for why God works this way, which is that the further you're away you are from Hashem. Then there's actually, when we mentioned drugs, there's a term in drug use called enabling. Like if you are, just use an example, like let's say some person is using drugs and you're giving them money that they're then spending on drugs. That's like a very overt form of enabling. So what's the best thing you could do to stop giving them money? So that's why what Hashem does is the further the further away you are from Him, He withdraws His hashgacha pratis, which doesn't prevent you from getting the money, but it means that you're just now in the laws of nature and you're on your own, so to speak. Hashem's not going to stop the laws of nature from functioning for you. but he will not enable you, you know? So like, that's my understanding about why it goes in proportion to your closeness to Hashem, because the closer you are to Hashem, then the more you'll use the hashgacha for the right purposes. And the further away you are, the more God's helping you would really enable you to indulge in all your bad views and decisions.
And why Hashem cares about each individual is a question you can't ask. If you don't know Hashem's
So
will.
that's going to be tied to the other topic I wanted to discuss this week, which we're not going to discuss, which is the why each and every Tzelem Elohim is valuable. You know, but it has to do with that though. Like with animals, God only cares about the species,
Yeah.
but with human beings, each person is someone who God potentially cares about. You know, meaning that you are a unique person, and God cares about you on an individual level. You know,
And God cares,
meaning that He'll give you hashgacha. Yeah. Whereas, let's say, like God, you know, sorry, but God doesn't care about your puppy. He cares about dogs in general. You know, He doesn't care about your puppy. You know, unless your puppy means something special to you, and then He'll care about the puppy insofar as it's part of your life. You know,
He doesn't even care about dogs in general.
he does, because they are a species that He created. That's part of the Arlakim Kitov, that you know, God created the species, and then like they perpetuate themselves, and then that's good, and that's good for their own sake. Like we said, when we're talking about the purpose of the universe, that God created each type of creature for its own sake. You know,
Not reason cares is different.
no, it's caring, but it's through hashgacha klaus. That's why it's klaus. Yeah.
It's like caring in the way we care about things. Is not like
Right, exactly. It's like maintaining, like when you care about someone, it's coming from an emotion, but how does it express itself? Maintaining and protecting, you know? So like, yeah. Okay, so now what does this have to do with Elihu's answer? So the more you study nature, the more hashgacha pratis you merit, and that will protect you from Ra type 1 and 2. Ra type 1 meaning, let's say, like diseases and natural disasters and like stuff that could happen, you know, like the bad effects of old age. And then Ra number 2, which is that, let's say, like with Abraham, you know, God helped him to defeat the kings of Canaan. You know, Hashem helped Bnei Israel to escape Mitzrayim, you know. So He'll protect you from harm that other people are trying to do to you. God thwarted Haman's plan, okay? So that's why studying nature is actually good for preventing you from suffering, because it actually like enables God to help, or it meets the criteria by which God will help you more. Okay, number 4. Any questions on this? Okay, point number 4 is the more you study nature, the better decision making you will have in a very Mishlaic sense, which will enable you to better protect yourself and others from Ra type 2 and Ra type 3. Okay, for example, I don't know how many of your grandparents grew up in a time when like people smoked. Well, like why did so many people smoke back then?
My grandma has like a jar of all like the cigarette packages.
Yeah, that's cool. But why did people smoke back then?
They didn't think it was unhealthy.
They didn't think it was unhealthy, and they even thought it was healthy, right? In certain cases, you know, like it was prescribed by doctors, you know. So why are things different now? Because we know more about the laws of nature, right? And therefore, the more we know about laws of nature, then the more we're able to protect ourselves and other people from harmful decisions. You know, we know more about the human body now, so we're better able to help people now. We know about the causes of diseases. We know about we know more about economics. We know more about like psychology. We know the more we learn about nature, then the less raw we will suffer that is self-inflicted or inflicted upon other people.
Even one, I would say.
Yeah, the only reason I'm not calling it one is because it's only from things that you would do to yourself or other people would do to you. Like,
Nature. If you're evacuate from a hurricane, and you understand how nature works,
right.
You'll actually.
Yeah, I guess I'm classing that as number 3 because the people who don't evacuate from the hurricane, it's like them doing it to themselves, you know? Like 1 is like stuff that is just completely beyond your control in nature, I think. Like that's how I'm using 1.
No, but you said sicknesses.
Sicknesses that are not from your own decisions. Like I would say, let's say obesity, like so many types of sickness come from obesity, but that has to do with your own eating habits, you know?
Let's say infection or coronavirus.
Right, so coronavirus is actually, I think, largely 2 and 3, because like think about how coronavirus started and spread, right? Like it might have started as like, I don't know what the current research is on it, but like what are you under the impression how it started? A bat, right? You know, and apparently these coronaviruses happen in bats all the time, right? But like once it leapt to human beings, so then the thing that spread it was the Chinese government not telling people about it, and like people not following, safety protocols, and like mismanagement of like, of communication, and like people's like stupidity of like, I don't want the government telling me what to do, and all of these type 2 and type 3, that's really what caused it to spread.
But once it's out there, like the ability to like do studies and whatever helps us create vaccines, which help ultimately like eliminate it.
Yeah, that's there. I guess there is an overlap, right? But yeah. I guess in my mind, I'm classing type 1 as stuff that's completely out of your control, because once it's in your control, then it's type 3 where you can do something about it. In that sense, it's self-inflicted. Okay, so this will actually save you from suffering as well. Okay, the more you do this. This is clear. Okay. And and also just like again, easy examples, like the example of like the guy who wants a yacht, so he digs in his yard to try to like unearth the yacht, right? And he doesn't get it, and he gets mad at God. Right? We talked about this early in the year. So that guy blames it on God, but really it's his own. He's going about it in the wrong way, So like if you want to get a certain job and like you don't go about it using chachma, then you're going to get the bad results. But that's not God's fault, and it's not other people's fault. It's your fault, So the more you learn about the world, the more you'll know how to engage it properly. Okay. And number 5, and this is the most subtle point, okay? The more you study nature, the more your value system will evolve from seeking physical success to seeking success as a knowledge-seeking Tzelem Elokim. Most of us are operating in a world where we value like, physical pleasures, popularity, money, like all these like things that Koheles would call yisrons, But the more you are involved in Hashem's chachma, in nature or certainly in Torah as well, but again, Iyov is like, not, involved with Torah in terms of the pshat, then the more you will value chachma. Now, how is that going to affect your suffering in life?
It'll be physical suffering, but that's not really matters.
Exactly. It'll be physical suffering, but that doesn't matter. And I think, didn't you bring up yesterday at the end some story of the Gemara? Like some guys went to visit this rabbi.
Yeah, I did bring up this. I don't see how that has to.
Maybe it's 2 different stories. What was the punchline of that story?
That he died and he asked Hashem, like, why do I have all this suffering? And
oh, that was a different. Sorry, yeah. That was a different thing. Yeah. I'll tie that back in later. But I was thinking of a different story about a rabbi. I don't even know if this is a Gemara story, but they said that like some guy wanted to know like why tzaddikim suffer. So like he was told, oh, go to such and such a town and like meet, find like such and such a guy, So he goes to the like and like ask him. So he goes to the town. And like he's asking for this guy, and he say, "Oh, over there." So like they point to like the really, really poor area of town, So he goes to that area, and he finds like this really like broken down old house, and he sees this guy in bed who's got a bunch of like bodily disabilities, and like he's all like in like rags or whatever, and like he asks him like Hashem, not Hashem. Someone, I'm looking for the answer of why Hashem allows tzaddikim to suffer, and I was told to come to you. And the guy says, like, why would I know anything about it? Like, I'm not suffering, because if your value system is such that it is not dependent on these physical things, then that's not suffering. Like if your primary value system is in terms of being involved in Hashem's chachma and serving him, so then you will not care that you look ugly. You will not care that you like aren't rich. You will not care that you don't live in the biggest house. So it will diminish your suffering because you've changed your value system. I'll give you another example if this is easier to relate to. Like the Rambam says that if you have a little kid who like all he wants to do in life is like play like basketball on the streets, and you tell him, hey, one day, like, you're not gonna be able to play basketball anymore. He'll think that you're taking away from him the greatest joy in life, But if you go to a king, okay, who used to like to play basketball as a little kid, and you say like, hey, king, like, you can't play basketball on the streets anymore, the king's not gonna be upset because to him, his enjoyment is from being king, It's like he's outgrown that enjoyment, and therefore the deprivation of it is not suffering for him. So too with like chachma is like, if you're attached to the physical, then there's a lot more suffering that you are exposed to because there's a lot more stuff that can happen to you. But the more you're attached to to Chachma, to Torah, to like the spiritual, then the less you'll be affected by physical things.
I feel like it's not even like a truth thing. I think it's more of like an emotional thing. Like I don't think you need to like seek truth in order to like feel content with it, to be samach b'chalko. Like you're basically saying be samach b'chalko.
Yeah. So if you remember in the Koheles, in the phases of Koheles, sorry, the stages of Koheles, not the parts of the experiment, but the stages, there was a level of samach b'chalko. And then there's a level where and that was still within Mishlei and Koheles. And then there's a level where he starts doing Shir Shirim, which is involved in Avas Hashem. And that's when he transcends Sameach B'chalko. So there's an idea of Sameach B'chalko where you are content with what you have in the sense that you are not seeking fantasies in the physical world, but your value system still is in the physical. And then there's a level where you're valuing something higher than the physical. And that's beyond Sameach B'chalko. That's like Sameach B'chalko, let's say this is the beyond. Yeah. This takes you beyond that. But I agree with you. There is a thing where you can be happy like with your lot in life, but there's a level where you're like the Rambam says, where you're involved in Avas Hashem and deriving pleasure from that.
I have a random question. Like I think whatever that's called, stoicism.
Yeah.
They would not see this point, right? They just see they still value physical.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. He's a Stoic philosopher who's in Stoicism started in like Greece and like became a Greek Roman philosophy of like ethics and philosophy. Yeah. Okay. Now the story you were making is, I think it is a reference. I've heard it in relation to Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva was being tortured to death, and the angels said Hashem, how can you let this happen? And he says, one more word from you, and I'm going to reduce the entire universe to like tohu vavohu, And at least that's the way it was presented in one of the Piyutim. And so my understanding of that is that relates to point number one, which is that if you don't understand the universe, then it's very easy for you to say, oh, well, Hashem, just like tweak this little thing here, But if you understood how all the laws of nature work and how the laws of Hashgacha work, you would see that like there are cases where in order to intervene in a specific way, Hashem would have to essentially redesign the entire universe around it,
So in that case, there are some times where Hashgacha practice can't happen because of
exactly. Or like in that case, it was, I think the easiest explanation is Chazal's explanation of once the destroyer is unleashed, it doesn't distinguish between tzaddikim and Rashayim. And Rabbi Akiva was in a time of the Roman persecution where it was the destruction was unleashed. And that's why Rabbi Akiva, anyone know the story of like what was Rabbi Akiva doing at the moment he was being killed? Shema. And what was his like statement or his like mood or his?
He didn't feel pain.
Was
he the one that was put in the Sefer Torah?
Oh, that was a different one. What do you say, Leah? Yeah. So he like his students asked him, Rabbi Akiva, why are you smiling? And he said, because all my life I've said v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavecha b'chol nafshecha b'chol me'odecha, and afilu notel es nafshecha, even if God takes your life. And he would say, I didn't know whether I'd be able to have avas Hashem if God was taking my life. And he realized, again, it was like that thing I quoted yesterday of like instead of saying why me, he said why not me, in the sense that like he realized this is how Hashem's system works, and like given these factors and stuff, then I can't be saved from this particular case. And yet that doesn't affect my Avas Hashem, because my Avas Hashem, now I'm going to tie it into this morning, my Avas Hashem is not conditional. It's not tied to what God does for me. If your love of Hashem is tied to what God is doing for you, then if God's allowing you to be tortured to death, then you're not going to love him anymore. His Avas Hashem was tied to appreciation of the universe that Hashem created. And in terms of how the universe works, he's just a particular. And given his nature of his knowledge of the system, then this is not something that Hashem is going to intervene with, Yeah, why don't you say? Oh.
It almost seems like you're asking people to stop caring about themselves.
Well, ultimately, yeah. Ultimately, that would be the only Unmute.
So the,
And hold on. Oh, do we lose it again? No. I think it did stop recording. Oh, it's still recording. Okay, good. Yay. All right.
Wait, but is it recording? Oh.
It's not screen sharing though. Leah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, your Hashem in Mishle is living a life where you are interacting, using your chachma to interact with the laws that Hashem set up. You know,
What do we have to do with fear?
because the word fear is when you recognize that there's something greater than yourself that you have to align yourself with, otherwise it'll harm you or affect you. So it's Yiras Hashem in the sense that you have to subordinate yourself to reality. You can't expect reality to like subordinate itself to you.
But that almost seems like that would go against opposite. Like,
Yeah, it
you can't
does.
have both of them.
Yeah, you can't have both of them. That's what I'm saying. Like Avos Hashem is a state you can be in, and that's like the highest level, but you can't remain there all the time because you do have to live in the physical world and interact with physical stuff.
There has to be like a balance of all
There has to be a balance of Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem. And that's why Chazal have to warn, don't get so caught up in Ava that you neglect Yiras Hashem, you know, because it would be possible for a person to do that and he just like starve to death, you know. What were you gonna say?
Different point I was going to
Sure.
say before.
Yeah.
Isn't it circular though? Because you are getting hashgacha when you get hashgacha in order to help improve yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're at the state where you get hashgacha, you don't.
Yes. But the thing is you care about you are a member of the system, but you're not caring about yourself as a self. You're caring about yourself as a member of the system. And that's why what's the highest expression of caring more about the system than yourself in terms of halakha? Like, okay, lishma is the state of mind. Yeah. In terms of, say again? Dying al Kiddush Hashem, where you are literally saying the system is more important than me. And if my death will aid in the perpetuation of the system, then I'm giving up my own life, you know?
By Hashem doing hashgacha, he's not.
By Hashem
Like, the
doing,
reason Hashem does hashgacha to you is because he wants to improve you as an individual.
yeah,
Not he wants it, whatever.
right.
But you don't want to improve yourself. Not you don't want to, but you are prioritizing the system to yourself.
Right, but that's because that is the greatest expression of your own values and your own self. Like yourself is, like, so to speak, you've identified with the name of Hashem to the point where like that is me caring about myself. You
That's
know,
ultimate truth.
that's ultimate truth. That's lishma. That's oved me'ava. Yeah, that's the highest level. You know, so it's not like giving up selfishness in the sense that you're going against selfishness. It's like there's a statement. I think I heard this from Rabbi Chait initially, where he said Avos Hashem is where the I becomes an it. Like not the I, but like the letter I, where you're not viewing yourself as through the ego, you're viewing yourself as just a particular creature within Hashem's world, and you're viewing it in his framework, so to speak. You know?
That's removing the self.
No, it's through the Selma Elohim that you're perceiving yourself that way. In other words,
The
as,
self is the real you, which is the real you.
the real you is the Selma Elohim, but you're perceiving it, so to speak, from a bird's eye view. I don't mean bird, like a Hashem's eye view. You know, Hashem doesn't have eyes, but you know, like meaning that like I am just one small creature in Hashem's world, and we all are aligned with His will, and like and the preoccupation with the I as an independent existence or as a me, that's not the thing that's important. It's like I as someone who could recognize Hashem's will in the entire universe and value that, and value like promoting that among human beings and among like whatever is in line with Hashem's will. We're talking about the highest levels of humanity here, which is why it doesn't ring true in terms of our own experience, because it's unimaginable that we could get to a point that we're like that, you know?
To the point of like we have free will for a reason. Like we're unique. We have emotions. We have all these things that make us special. So why would we try to be like the creatures that don't?
Good question.
I think you're using and like the thing that you were saying before, I was getting a little confused with your terminology.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like you were saying that you as a creature are part of the larger system, but you as a Selma can't.
Oh yeah, I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't saying creature to the exclusion of Tzelem Elohim. I meant like
And I was
you would disagree.
because you as a Selma Kim, yeah, I don't think that part of you is just part of the larger system of the world. That is part of truth.
Can you explain what you mean?
This is kind of based on our conversation with Rav Pesach, so I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Whatever, but like that you as a creature. What could you repeat what you said?
I was saying how I wasn't saying you as a creature to the exclusion of you as a Tzelem Elohim. I meant that you are just one like tile in the mosaic of the entire universe, you know, and you know, that all operates in accordance with Hashem's will.
I can't articulate that.
Okay.
I have to think about it.
Yeah, all right, we can think about it. So just to tie this all together, just to elaborate on the two-word summary. So if I had to put it into like a sentence, it would be the study of nature, meaning Hashgacha Klalis, will bring you to the realization that Hashem works through systems, even in Hashgacha Pratis. I guess it's more than one sentence. And to the extent that you understand the systems, you'll be able to align yourself with them in a way that maximizes Tov and minimizes Ra through all these ways, meaning that you will have more realistic expectations about what the systems can and can't do. You'll have a more accurate realization of what your place is in the system. You will make yourself more worthy for Hashgacha Pratis, which will save you from the aspects of the Hashgacha Klala system that you can't control. You will be able to make more decisions, which is aligning yourself to be in the best position to get the good out of the systems. And because you're caring about knowledge of the systems as your main value, as opposed to caring about physical and psychological things, then you will suffer less. So the interesting, and this is why it's an interesting answer to the question of Iyov is saying, like, why am I, so now let's put it into Iyov. Hashem, why am I suffering? And Hashem says, study nature. That will be the route through which Iyov is removed from suffering, because his suffering is directly as a result of the fact that he does not understand how Hashem systems work. Okay, which, by the way, you remember in the very beginning of the year when it talked about the terms that are used to praise Iyov, it did mention, we pointed out that there are 3 terms that it doesn't say about him. Tzaddik, not Chassid. It doesn't say that about him, you're right, but it doesn't say that about him. Chacham and Ohev Hashem. You know, so he's not a tzaddik in the sense that he was not involved in living a life where he's like caring about the system. You know, he was not a chacham because he lacked knowledge of Hashem's systems. Okay, he's clearly a chacham in terms of like his debating ability, you know, but not in terms of knowledge of Hashem's systems. And he was not in the framework of Avas Hashem, where his main value in life was seeking knowledge of Hashem. You know, and what that ended up doing is it ended up resulting in him, when bad things happened to him, he was overtaken by the Satan, which is another way of saying nature is one aspect, but what was the main thing that, so there were 2 aspects that caused Iyov to suffer. One was nature. He suffered a bunch of physical stuff because he wasn't under Hashgacha Pratis, but what else is the Satan? Yetzer Hara. So his psychological orientation to what was happening to him made his suffering even worse than it could have been, or than it needed to be. And that's the sense in which the, what do you call it? That had to do with his victimization mentality. And he was still attached. Do you remember what the argument the Satan made to Hashem to try to like say that Iyov was a phony?
Kill his son.
Well, that was the actual dare, you know, but what did Hashem say about like why Iyov is serving Hashem? Because Hashem's giving him all this good stuff, which is pointing out that Iyov's relationship with Hashem was dependent on Hashem sheltering him and giving him all this good stuff. So he was still attached to the physical value system, you know? All right, we'll have to explore this a little bit more.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Why do we even care about seeking truth? And if ultimately, like, it's just supposed to help us to not care about like what happens to ourselves, and just like makes us want to die for Hashem.
I don't agree with that characterization of it, but I do think that it's a good question, which I'm not going to answer in a soundbite. Yeah, let's talk about that more. Okay. I'm not saying that we should want to die Al Kiddush Hashem. I'm saying that would
Like,
be.
that's the highest level.
No, I'm saying that that would be the greatest extent of not caring about yourself. The highest level is Avas Hashem. You know, but Avas Hashem does not necessitate that you die Al Kiddush. If you ask Rabbi Akiva, would you rather die or not die? He would say, I would rather not die. But if he is being killed and he's able to maintain his Avas Hashem without it being affected, then that is the high, that shows that his level of Avas Hashem is on the highest level.
But then I feel like he's not on the highest level. Because if you're attached to your physical and you don't want die, then you're not really on the This also has to do with what Rabbi Shea was saying.
Okay, I gotta hear like a summary of that. Yeah. Hopefully you remember it like for like next time we talk about it, which
We'll
is
give you a little
Yeah.
summary.
yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, yeah. All right.
So
Sorry.
yeah, you can be a type of